All right. Well, welcome to the Monday, August 16th, 2021 Littleton Conservation Commission meeting. We'll open the meeting approving the minutes. Does anyone have any omissions or corrections to the July 26th minutes?
I got some comments from Kyle.
Okay. Are they just typos?
Yeah, it was nothing substantial though.
Okay.
Everything looked good.
All right. Anybody else?
It looks good.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion if.
And I think we can probably just move to approve the July 26th and the August 11th at the same time.
That's sounds good. What about August?
Oh, sorry.
It's all good. Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain
Julie.
Yep.
Sorry, just one thing on the August 11th minutes. I'm neither present or absent for that meeting, so you can throw me in any category you like.
Okay.
Yeah, you were absent, right? Because you couldn't really get in.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of July 26th and August 11th as amended.
Second that.
All right. Chase seconded. Great. Does someone want to do roll call?
We have a clerk for that now, don't we?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez. All right. So I'll go down the line. Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase.
Chase Carbeck, aye.
Myself, I, and Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
All right. It's unanimous.
All right. Great. Okay. We'll move on to administrative discussion. Amy, should I just go down the line, or is there something we want to make sure we get to before 7:45?
No, down the line's fine. And
Okay,
I got
great.
some other things to add too.
Okay, no problem. So the first item is Spectacle Pond Association Bennett's Brook Watershed Meeting, September 7th at 5:30. I did see you send the email around.
Yes, and I did mention it last week. I just wasn't sure if anybody wanted to go or not, but let me know so I can RSVP to them.
Okay.
And I can probably always just go too if nobody else wants to.
Did I respond already? I think I said I would go. Did I respond by email to you?
I don't think so, but I will take that as a response.
This is the September 7th meeting you're talking about?
Right, yep.
Yeah. I think I have that in my calendar.
Okay, good.
Is that associated with Clean Lakes, or is that different? Is Clean Lakes just Long Lake?
No, because it is, the water department's doing the whole low floor, whatever it is, analysis in that watershed. This just goes a little bit further up in the watershed.
Okay.
Excuse me, up Bennett's Brook. So it's kind of pulling them in. So I believe the folks from Spec Pond and the Watershed Association have a presentation or something. The water LWD or Clean Lakes will be there also, as far as I know. So just a discussion with neighboring towns, basically.
Okay. Okay.
It's good because I'm an associate for Littleton and I live in Ayer, so
There you go.
No.
Have you
Perfect.
joined the Heirs Commission yet, Anna?
No, I've been meaning to get on it,
Do
but
it.
my
Yeah.
life is really busy right now because my kids are about to go to college, so I like laying low for most
Oh,
things.
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that.
A lot
Okay,
to do.
fair enough. Okay. The next item is meeting dates.
Why don't we wait till we have more people here? But right now, I'm scheduled through September, but if we're going to make any changes, I need at least a month head notice, either for, I assume it sounds like we're staying on Zoom, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
I don't think Sarah can do Tuesdays or Thursdays, and I could probably do every other Wednesday. So.
Okay. Yeah, those are important considerations. And yeah, it seems like we're definitely going to be on Zoom through September. So be key to include others in that conversation. Okay.
I'll keep nagging you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Next item is mowing.
Yeah, the mowing. So I mentioned this before, and I did mention it to Joe Layden that the town in general may need to take some consideration of how mowing is handled, because it's, highway does some, including lawn mowing around the town hall, things like that. And Parks and Rec needs some, but their guy through highway has quit. And we have stuff that's kind of not getting done and so much volunteers. So I don't know, somehow we need to come up with an idea of how to address it and more importantly, how to get it funded. And I don't know if we'll be able to figure something out for fall town meeting or not. I'm kind of guessing that might be a little bit too close, but we should get the ball rolling somehow.
Yeah, I would think they would need information in September to get anything on the agenda or approved through select board. Oh, okay, good. It looks like Kyle just rejoined. I just noticed he had dropped off.
Oops.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Yeah, the warrants are open, which started to stampede me about things that might go on there.
Yeah.
So I'll be circling back more, I guess, with Joe, and I will try to nail down Chris Stoddard, basically.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it would make the most sense for highway to do it, but I'm not sure if they see it the same way or not.
Right.
I
Yeah.
imagine it'll be a full-time seasonal person.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of mowing.
It's a lot of mowing.
Okay. Well, maybe have a preliminary conversation and keep us posted, or, if you want, me to join, or, one of us, just let us know.
Yeah, if there's anybody else interested, let me know. And then
Okay.
we can go. It's just good to have someone to bounce some ideas off of and reality check.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe just along those lines, just before 7:45, the one thing I also wanted to add is, I think I mentioned this before, that I've been thinking for a while of asking for her gay properties, which are 204 and 206, I think, Foster, to have those transferred from kind of general town over to conservation. The back half of the properties are already under conservation restriction with Sudbury Valleys. Really not too sure the front part could even support a house, but it'd be a great place to have a little parking lot and for a trail to come out. So I don't know if you all supported that or not. I also mentioned to Joe that might be a possibility for the fall.
It sounds good.
I think it's great. Access to conservation land off of the road there would be a lot better than through the town forest or something like that.
Well, it'd still be basically through the town forest, but yeah, and that's kind of what spurred it is if Kay and Durkee, if they need to build a boardwalk, I want to think ahead about, where the boardwalk's going to come out while we have someone on the hook.
Would that connect to Bumblebee as well, or no? Is that too far?
No, theoretically, there is some kind of easement up Bumblebee into that area. And the land stewards have tried to find it and had a hard time finding it. It's like right next to people's houses and right up the road or something like it. It's a funny little easement. And I think it also
They all
hits
seem to
wetlands.
be. Okay.
Yeah, funny thing about that. Yeah, it'd be
Okay.
nice if that was a real connection, but who knows?
Yeah. All right. So I guess we just did the Hergé property. We have 1 minute. Do you have any quick updates or administrative items?
Just to let you know that we put out a call for volunteers for the boardwalk building at Town Forest in Cloverdale and Williams, and have gotten a great response. So now that things have dried out a bit, I think we can actually get started on those. And the Eagle Scout, Brendan is done with his trail. So if any of you want to go out and look at it, there's no boardwalks yet, but you can get through right now. And that would actually be the select board who would sign off on his paperwork. So unless you wanted to hear from him, he probably wasn't going to come in front of you guys.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to go for a walk, but I don't want to stand in the way of, him completing his project either. So
Yeah, you know what is just park on
Jam 'em up.
Harwood at the Town Forest sign, and
Yeah.
there's flags up so you
Walk in.
can follow it in.
okay, great.
Then we pick up the rest of the stuff at the end.
Okay. All right, sorry, technical difficulties. All right, so it's 7:45. Open the 7:45 public meeting request for determination of applicability, 12 Cricket Lane, file number U46-2-0, improve the support of an existing porch. And it looked like there's some folks here with 12 Cricket next to their names. I don't know if
And Kevin from Civil Solutions, I believe is the consultant on this.
oh yep, I do see Kevin. Okay, great. So go ahead, guys.
So should we just walk through what we're trying to accomplish and how? That
That would be great.
Yeah, if you want to go through the details of your project.
sure.
And you can share if you would like, if you have something to share, if you have photos or anything.
No, we don't have any photos to share, but actually the space is behind us. So when we moved into this house, just a little over a year ago, there was some evidence of a little bit of shifting of not the primary foundation, but there was an addition to the house that was probably done 50 years ago or so that started out as just a regular old porch and then ended up being enclosed. And it sits on, I believe, 9 support columns. And we had a structural engineer and a geotechnical engineer come and check out the house. And it was determined by really a very quick dig by one of the support columns that the existing columns are only in a foot, maybe a foot and a half deep, which means we have a whole chunk of house that is sitting on very much not to code support columns. So what we are hoping to accomplish is to, keep the exact same footprint of what we have now, but simply swap out those columns that are not dug well. There's actually one of them is sitting on concrete that was molded from plastic buckets. So we are hoping to eliminate the very homemade support structure that we had on the back of the house here overlooking the lake, and bring it up to code and something that is going to stop the house from continuing to move. The house sits on a pretty steep slope. Where we are on Cricket Lane here, has a sharp slope down. So I think that, first of all, equipment being brought in, would not be good when it comes to maintaining the landscape, but I don't even think that physically any machinery could be brought in. So the plan is to have the new columns hand dug by Erickson Support Works. And that's pretty much it. Is there anything more to add there? So nothing new, replacing existing columns. So it's the 9 columns, and then there's a smaller post that supports just a set of side stairs that will also need to be swapped out alongside.
I just have one question. Since you're digging deeper holes, are you going to be disposing of dirt, or are you planning on keeping it on site, or what?
So what they, and I don't know if any of my support works friends are here, but they had mentioned that a silt fence is going to be installed within 10 to 15 feet of the installed piers, and plastic is going to be laid out to hold the soil until backfill. And if there's additional soil that's left over after backfilling, then it would be removed to Erickson's premises.
Thank you.
Did your engineers or geotech folks indicate whether this is like an emergency? Do you have like cracking and like 1 foot sounds kind of alarming?
It's surprising that it's been. I mean, it's possible. So they didn't dig out every one of the columns, so it could have been an anomalous one. But we do see evidence of frost heaving, which is what the geotechnical guy had said. So when I think it was the first freeze and thaw of the season, because again, this is only the first. We've only cycled through here 1 year. We saw some cracking along the edge of the ceiling in the area, which is the former porch, and you can also see on a set of concrete steps down, on the side of the house where some of the concrete has cracked because of a gradual movement of the house. So it's I think it's pretty surprising that there wasn't more movement sooner. But as we've been here, we have definitely noticed where the prior homeowners or folks before that have done some cleaning up of cracks and making them not show during the home buying process. So we're starting to see some of that wear down a little bit. So I'd say an emergency as far as we want to prevent any kind of cracking and interior damage. But there wasn't an indication that the whole thing was going to fall in, because I think structurally the rest of the house, we're sitting on, as you can see, the original home on the picture there is on just a normal foundation. And it's it's a fairly small component of it that's sitting on those failing posts.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you mind scrolling back up to the map, please? I'm just wondering.
There's some background noise. If somebody could, if everyone can mute except for the speaker, that would be great.
It may be us. We have a 3-year-old on an iPad behind us. They can mute us if we're not answering questions. Sorry.
Does the you indicated that it slopes down towards the pond? Is the slope where the staircase is it a little more level there? I think I read when I was reading the background stuff that they're actually proposing a helical pile for the stairs, which wouldn't be hand dug, so that would definitely be some sort of a piece of machinery. I'm trying to look at the contours, but it's kind of tough to tell what kind of slope is up near the staircase.
Yeah, it's not as sharp there. It kind of more gradually goes down to the side toward our neighbors on the left. So it looks a bit different than directly behind the house where it just goes straight down to the water.
I mean, I'll say here, my read of this was that the helical pier is still going to be within the 50 foot. Is that correct? When I look at the page 10 of the structural details.
But when you look at the plan that Amy had, I thought the same thing. That's why I was asking Chase, but the plan that Amy has it well outside of the 50, right where her cursor is now, right?
Yeah, I read it to be just around the corner of the structure. But.
Yeah, this figure here is very different than the plan that I assume is more of an as-built plan.
Yeah, that might not be exactly to scale.
Yeah,
it doesn't exactly look that way.
No.
I mean, given how much of this work is within the 50. I don't have any problem with the project. Completely understand why it needs to be done. And don't even have any problem with what's proposed. I'm uncomfortable doing it without a formal filing, given the amount of material that'll be taken out, needs to be managed. The slopes could run down into the water, et cetera. And would like to make sure that we have a good understanding of the specifics of where that material is going to be, how long it's going to be, what the restoration is going to look like, et cetera.
What does it mean to do a formal filing versus this?
We were just looking at here. This is just a RDA, right? Am I?
Correct.
This is just
Yeah,
to
that's an
determine
RDA.
if you need to apply for an NOI or not. It's kind of,
Well, but can't we condition an RDA?
Yeah, but we've got so much less control, follow up, verification, et cetera.
Yep, fewer teeth for sure.
That could be, I did recommend the RDA just because it was a replacement, although there is a lot of digging to go along with it. But we can condition it that they let us know when it begins, and I can just do site inspections. Does the owner know how long this might take?
They had predicted 2 weeks, and I think the start was September. I can pull up. Sorry, the dog. It was a mid-September start date. We'll mute it while the dog is barking. I'll get you the exact date.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Chase in that but I think maybe frequent inspections by Amy might cover it. It's just the access to the damage that might be caused to the buffer there by just equipment. Although you said it was just going to be hand dug, so maybe that's a moot point as well.
And the date is would be September 9th, if all is approved, that they've got us penciled in. And as I mentioned, they had predicted 2 weeks.
Well, the commission could also ask for more of a construction sequencing schedule type thing to be submitted under the RDA or under a new notice of intent, or as part of the RDA approval.
Yeah, that would be a good thing, because I'm wondering also if they encounter any trouble digging by hand, are they going to have to bring in equipment? I mean, is there a contingency plan for that or no?
Not that I'm aware of, but we can follow up with more information if that's part of it. Happy to.
And there's no tree removal, just double checking as part of this. No tree removal is required.
Any ground cover removal? You said you're planning on putting stockpiling the material and silt fences within about 10 or 15 feet. You're going to have to clear out bushes, shrubs, anything like that to accomplish that.
There's a little bit of growth on the slope. There's some couple wild blueberry bushes and little baby saplings that come up. So there's nothing substantial on there. It's kind of a vaguely green slope. I think it's so sloped it's hard for anything to really grow there.
I guess that, Laura, that was part of my concern, is that because it's so sloped, what is there, taking it out makes it hard to replace.
I noticed
Again, I don't have an issue with the project, really. It clearly needs to be done. I'm just concerned about things getting away from us and turning into a much bigger thing than some hand dug piles. Especially given that we're already planning on having at least one helical pile out there, which I mean, I guess you can put them in manually, but that's, I guess I'll be surprised if ultimately that goes in manually.
I know they can be put in with kind of gas powered handheld things.
Yeah, and the list did say that if they couldn't remove something by hand, it would be an additional cost. So I'm wondering if they're not going to be removing an obstruction by hand, what are they going to be using to remove whatever it is, like rock? Something to ask.
Okay.
I guess the one thing I would say is this seems like it's pretty urgent, and we are getting into fall. I'm not sure like what flexibility we might have. Although what is it, August 16th. We have 2 more meetings. Actually, no, 1 more meeting, right? The 23rd. Between now and September 9th. Yeah, I'm just thinking about logistics and reality as far as schedule goes. And I think, Amy, if something went wrong, we always would have an enforcement order at our disposal, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
What does that mean?
An enforcement order means like if you told us, so say we, went with a RDA with robust conditions, and your contractor said under no circumstances are we going to bring any equipment out there, and then Amy goes out for an inspection and they've got like a giant excavator out there excavating your entire yard, which is not what was approved. Then the enforcement order would be a way to basically stop work and, get you back in line. I mean, it's usually for, conditions that impact the resource area. But it's basically what you heard before was the commission saying like the RDA, which is the filing that you just did, it doesn't have very sharp teeth, whereas the full filing has sharper teeth. And that's, so I'm just trying to see if there's another way to, we still have teeth, it's just a different mechanism. So I'm just trying to think about ways to be, it just seems like this situation in particular is a little more urgent than some of the other projects that we deal with. I do think one big question though is, this whole, if we can't get it out by hand, then it's going to cost more, which, leads us to believe equipment might be necessary. But I don't know. I think, I think clearly replacing the pilings is necessary. But we're, the concern for the resource area is real, especially with a steep slope, like you've mentioned. So I don't know. I guess I'm leaning more towards an RDA with robust plans and a lot more information about construction, to try to help with the timeline, and then using enforcement. But I don't know if that's, we don't typically do that either. So just interested to hear what others
I can
think.
get my head around that, Julie. With this qualifier though, that what I don't want to hear in 3 weeks is, oh hey, you approved it under an RDA based on manual removal. We've now got it partially open. Turns out we need heavier equipment to do that. Now it's a real emergency, and the resource area be damned. We've got to get substantial equipment in there to address this. And that's really my concern, is that this just gets away from us. If it really ends up being exactly as scoped, which Lauren, Niraj, I hope very much for you that's the case, then I don't have a dog in this fight. But if things go sideways, I will not be particularly heavily swayed by created and manufactured emergencies.
And the commission could also either try to do a site walk, and then look to issue this on the 23rd, a site walk with the contractor. I don't know if that can be arranged or not. And I would certainly suggest that one of the conditions be that there is a pre-construction site walk, with at least me, once the erosion controls are in.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want them to go through another winter with, this type of structure.
Yeah, we've been holding off on repainting that back room because we're gonna have to do it all over again. But I mean, that sounds fair to me. Yeah, I can make sure that we get somebody from over there come on site and walk you and us through the specifics. So that doesn't sound problematic.
Laura, can you just confirm for me that we're not building a new deck? You're just stabilizing the existing deck. Is that right?
A new deck? No. So they're gonna add like a beam to the bottom of the house that these new posts are going to attach to, because right now the posts are almost like attached to the outside of the house. They're holding weight by kind of this way instead of being underneath, which means that, there can be pulling like that. So they're adding a support beam that's going to sit underneath the existing, formerly porch structure. And these posts that they're installing are going to hold it up in that regard instead of just being bolted to the side of the house, which the current ones are.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like we're at 8:06. What are your thoughts, folks? How do we want to
That's a
proceed?
direct quote.
I've only been hearing it every other Monday for 4 years.
I think.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
I'd be comfortable with pursuing an RDA with robust conditions and a site walk to pair with it. And then on the 23rd, we can review everything and put together a list of conditions that we're comfortable with and put it together. I think we'll be good.
I do want to make sure one of the conditions explicitly states that, and just take the language out of the application, but really emphasizes that there's not going to be heavy equipment used. Everything will be manually or hand equipment. And I realize that's redundant with the application, but I don't want to.
Well, but that's because it does also say that if it can't be dug out by hand, it's gonna cost more. So I think that, Laura, that's a big if you want to iron out with your contractor, because we need to know as well.
Okay.
And then I would also like to see a condition on this that essentially says something along the lines of, if the work is started but not completed this fall, that there's some, we need to check in with you guys, and there needs to be some stabilization if that were to happen.
Yeah, we definitely don't want it started and not finished this fall as well. So that would be a mutual feeling.
I feel like we're scaring you guys, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Well, we've seen a lot of these.
Yeah.
All right, so it's appropriate to understand what could happen.
So does the commission want to try to do a sidewalk maybe on Thursday if the contractor can be out there, or just leave it to me for pre-construction, or how do you want to handle that?
I'm good to leave it with you for pre-construction. I probably wouldn't be able to make Thursday anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Thursday's fine for us. I
Pretty
can
straightforward.
reach out to Erickson and set it up.
Okay.
Well, does
So
the commission want me to do that before you issue the permit, or just make that one of the conditions of the permit?
Just condition it.
Well, one of the typical conditions is a pre-construction meeting anyway, so, yeah. So I think I'm seeing 3 conditions: the pre-construction meeting, if the work is started but not completed by the winter, must submit a stabilization plan, no heavy equipment, all hand equipment, oh, and actually the construction sequencing.
Should the stabilization condition just be regardless? I mean, do we want to see what's going on out there upon the completion anyway? Does this have, like with the NOI, we have the completion or certificate of compliance, but for an RDA, is there anything like that? You know what I mean? If they're, again, it just should be hand digging. Hopefully it's not getting, the resource areas and getting disturbed too much, but I think we'd want to keep our eye on it if it does get impacted and needs to be stabilized.
Maybe Kyle, I think that's a good point, right? Maybe just plan a follow-up with Amy,
Yeah.
or something like that, where we don't need to have a completion report per se.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to submit a certificate of compliance, but at least a site walk or a site visit by Amy at a minimum to.
Oh, yeah, what I would probably end up doing is going out there before construction, go out there during construction, and when they're finished, do a quick walk. And then maybe the owners or I can go out in the spring or something. I assume you'll be reseeding this or whatever, to just make sure nothing's eroding.
Mm-hmm. Do you all have your building permits all put together? Are you still working on those?
I don't know the status of the building permit. But
I am holding it up.
Okay.
You are? Okay.
I didn't think you had it. I thought you needed this first.
Yeah, sorry. Do you have everything else? I think was maybe a better way to ask that. Okay.
Yeah.
That all sounds fine to me.
All right, so we'll entertain a motion if we're gonna close this out tonight.
Oh, Julie, did we want to wait until the 23rd meeting once Amy has a look at it on Thursday?
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure what we were doing, if we were just adding a condition for the pre-construction meeting, if that was the same thing, so I wasn't sure.
I thought it was. I thought that was one of the conditions. So Thursday was going to be the pre-construction meeting. So I guess I'm confused now.
I wouldn't do the real pre-construction until they have the erosion controls up. And I doubt that'll happen by Thursday.
Yeah,
Right.
start to the 9th.
Yeah.
I mean, given that, I'd rather just get them moving.
Yeah, if we're holding up a building permit on just somebody going out to see the site that isn't going to have any erosion controls or anything, I don't know what we're going to learn from that, honestly.
Right, so that's where I thought we had landed.
So then, Julie, you're looking for a motion to issue a negative determination on.
Right, are we doing negative
Well,
2 or negative, Amy?
Oh, yeah, which one?
I think it's a 3 because you're not in a resource area, just a buffer zone.
Okay. So I'm looking for a -3 determination with conditions.
So I move that the
So-
Conservation Commission issue a -3 determination on the request for determination of applicability for 12 Cricket Lane. We'll issue that with conditions.
Second.
All right, shall I go down the line? Kyle,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase,
Chase Gerbeck, aye.
myself, I, Brian.
I'm going to abstain from this one just because I missed the front part of it.
Okay, and Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So I will contact you, Laura Niraj, maybe tomorrow, so when the permit is actually ready, and we can discuss from there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Look,
Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
All right, moving on. Open the public meeting request for determination of applicability for 32 Lake Warren Drive, U39-15-0, septic system upgrade. Someone want to speak to this?
Sure, I'm here. I'm Kevin Ritchie from Civil Solutions. I'm here on behalf of the Sussman family. They own the property at 32 Lake Warren Drive. They've currently got a failed septic system, and they've got we've designed a new system which has been permitted through the Board of Health and has been approved. So we've got 32 Lake Warren Drive, the Butts Mill Pond to the rear of the property, Lake Warren Drive here. Currently, there's a paved driveway comes in here to the garage, and there's also a turnaround or continuation of the driveway across the front. The existing septic tanks here in the front yard, and the leaching area is here in the side yard. So we're proposing to do away with this pavement, do away with this section of the driveway, new septic tank. We have reduced the offset to the street line. We've been to the Board of Health to ask for the variance to reduce the offset to the street line from 10 feet to 5 feet. So we have been able to push the new leaching area 85 feet off the edge of the pond. Got some siltation barrier here. The existing system, we're just going to leave in place and let it dry up and become inert. And we're proposing a new septic tank here. So again, we're 85 feet off the pond with the leaching area. Tanks, the new tank is 76 feet off. Obviously, we've got a nice barrier here. We've got the house, and then we've got the siltation barrier down the side. The pavement, once it's removed, we're just going to reseed the front area to lawn. That's pretty much it, I would say.
What kind of activity are you needing to do with the old system? Just leave it there?
We're just going to abandon it in place. It's a leach field. Once the effluent stops going there, it'll just kind of dry up and become inert.
Okay.
How high is groundwater?
The groundwater was, in these test holes here, it was about 7 feet, 7.5 feet. So we had it at 7.5 feet here and 7 feet over here. That's basically
Like
what
any
we
other
are.
space on the property?
No,
But as far
basically the front yard is basically a flat area. It kind of slopes down the side, and the back is a lower grade yard.
Kevin, it seems pretty obvious from your drawing, but can you just confirm that you don't need to do any clearing, vegetation, or shrubs or anything like that?
Yeah, no. So there's a few trees along here; those are remaining. There's a few little shrubs here. I would guess they may remove something here just to get the tank to fill in the old tank, or to remove it and to on the area where there would be any major vegetation, right in this area
are there storm drains nearby?
Not that I recall. Didn't locate any, so I would assume there are none in this section.
So it looks like you're removing impervious area?
Yes, so the driveway here, you can see the driveway it's kind of a horseshoe, I guess. We're removing all that. That'll all be removed. And we're just maintaining this section here of the driveway.
Are you reinstalling a walkway or something from the driveway to the front door?
Not to my knowledge. They may put a walkway in, but
I guess I would advise the applicants in this scenario to, if they were going to do that, it may be wise to just include it in these plans right now.
right.
I have no problem with one. I find it unlikely that they're not going to install one.
Right, especially since now they're coming off, parking out in the front and walking in the front door.
Precisely. Can I ask one other pedantic question? I just want to make sure that the slope and grading doesn't go towards the existing paved driveway to, I don't know what's north here, but to the left of this drawing. I see you've got the silt fence on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Just confirm we don't need anything on the left-hand side.
It's pretty flat over. I would say it's relatively flat all through here. Doesn't really start to drop off until you get to the back end of the back end of the house, and then it kind of rolls down.
Are you going to have to elevate the leaching field though, in order to?
No, it's staying. No, we will not have to elevate it. It's staying just level with the grade that's there now.
Okay, good.
I mean, that looks fine to me. The only thing I would want to make sure, Amy, if you go out and take a look at this to make sure that we don't need siltation fence on the left-hand side towards the garage. And then again, reiterate my advice to the applicants that you may want to show the walkway on this, presuming one is installed. But
Right, I mean, unless they're installing one.
Right. But otherwise, I think a negative determination here is reasonable.
Do you want to keep it open until you know about the walkway, or just kind of make that a condition that a walkway is okay, or?
I'd make it a condition. I wouldn't want to hold the project up just over a walkway.
I agree.
I think we've got a hand up.
Okay. I can't see the screen sharing. So if someone
It's
wants-
Bartlett. It's Bartlett Harvey.
Okay. Go ahead. State your name and your address.
If I could put in a word here, I'm in the process of buying this property, and the Sussmans are putting in the new septic system, and I have proposed to the owner that they put in a loose flagstone walkway from the driveway to the front door, which would be set in sand and would be, I guess, pervious by your definition, if that matters to anybody.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I see this as a definite improvement for the resource area.
For sure.
Right. Okay. I want to add
So
one
far-
other,
Okay.
Amy, for a condition, just for them to inspect where the storm drains are on the road, you know, since this work is happening so close to the road, and it's really easy for erosion to run down a road and into the storm drain. So I would just want to add that, you know, the location of the storm drains be determined and erosion controls be added in that direction, if, you know, if there are any.
I can make that part of, I was going to make that kind of part of the erosion control inspection condition. So I got the two conditions, the erosion control inspection and kind of more of a finding that a walkway such as a flagstone is allowed.
Sounds good.
If there's no further discussion, I'd be looking for a motion for another -3.
I'll move that we issue a negative determination 3 on the project at 32 Warren Drive.
Second.
All right, I'll go down the line. Kyle.
I'm sorry, let me amend that with the conditions stated.
Second again.
Okay, so roll call. Kyle,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase,
Chase Gerbeck, aye.
myself, I, Brian,
Brian Crowley, aye.
and Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
It's unanimous.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And
Good
I will
luck.
let you know when the permit is ready, Kevin, and we can figure that out.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Moving on, open the continued public hearing notice of intent, 262830 Cricket Lane. Parcel U46-9, 10, and 11, DEP file number 204-0938, for raising 3 dwellings and construction of a new dwelling and sewage disposal system. All right, who's gonna present?
Yep. Good evening. This is Brandon Ducharme with David E. Ross. We've had a chance to present at your last hearing, get some initial comments. We also had a site visit in which we were able to kind of take a look at the 3 existing structures and go over what we're looking to propose, which was a single structure, generally in the location of number 30 Cricket Lane. And what we've done here, just sharing my screen, is quickly just to kind of go over some of the comments. And again, just to kind of recap, we've got 3 existing houses, 26, 28, and 30 Cricket Lane. This is kind of the terminus of the lane. This is Spectacle Hill Pond. The wetland is associated with the mean annual high water of the pond. Pretty much the entirety of all 3 of these properties are located within the 50-foot wetland offset. And you can see this is the limit of the 100-foot buffer zone that kind of extends up to the existing roadway. This revised plan here, one of the concerns was there's an existing 10-inch maple tree in this location here. We had a stockpile pretty close to that, and we had a proposed well. What we were able to do is slide this proposed well location further up the slope here and still maintain that 50-foot separation requirement that's required by Title V State Environmental Code. And that also kind of brought up this temporary slurry basin, which is just to be used when they actually install the well. And we moved further from these trees the proposed stockpile area that's wrapped in erosion control. One of the other things is we got some additional information. As part of this filing, we talked a little bit about the floodplain and how it's approximated in this area. And part of this project is going to be that we're obviously going to have to prepare documentation for FEMA to get them to agree to a limit of the floodplain as it pertained to them, specifically looking at flood insurance and that sort of thing. Amy Green was able to provide us with some good information, some intel. There's been a couple of cases where this is flooded. There's obviously an outlet structure on the pond. I think it was back in 2012 is my memory, which is the greatest flooding event that happened when there was actually a failure at that control structure. The highest recorded elevation at that time, we basically included that, which is, I believe was 8 feet higher than what the existing pond elevation is. And what that transponds to here is about the 176 contour, which is kind of right along where the hand is kind of traveling here and around the property. So the other thing in moving this well, it also helps get us outside of that estimated floodplain area. Lastly, there was a concern pertaining to one of the trees in particular. There was a significant maple tree that was going to be removed, and what we've done is we've added 2 more additional trees, which is a total of 4, and increased the size of those to what's a 2-inch caliper, which is a more significant tree to help revegetate and mitigate the loss of that tree. A lot of the other discussion was pertaining to looking at potential alternatives where we are looking for a waiver for work in the 50-foot offset. We've gone through the attachment A, which is the narrative of the document, and just provided some additional verbiage in there, kind of documenting the alternatives that we came up with. But the other thing we did is we prepared an alternative layout plan, which helps to kind of depict what an alternative, what we consider a viable alternative would be. Part of the discussion at the initial meeting kind of detailed in on the fact where, as we have 3 existing houses, and what we're looking to do is to raise all 3 of those houses, and we're looking to actually, the house that we're proposing will be further from all 3 of those houses that, given the existing offset from the pond, and essentially being up here, in the furthest area we can get from the pond. One of the comments was, where as we look at house number 30, we weren't exactly on the exact existing footprint. And in some of these other cases that have been before you, there's been an issue of, or the questions have raised pertaining to adhering to what are the existing dimensions. So as we look at that, one of our alternatives here would be to simply, rebuild all 3 of these existing structures being held to the exact footprint that they are today. And one of the things that was evident at the site walk was obviously all 3 of these are in disrepair. Any work to rehab these structures is going to require, new foundations, essentially rebuilding entirely in place. The other thing that would be required, which is would be to bring into compliance with Board of Health. All 3 of these houses don't currently have a functioning septic system, and they've been drawing a water source from the pond. So looking at that, what would be required to bring these into compliance with Board of Health would be getting a potable water source, not drawing off the pond. And due to the same reason we can't fit an on-site leaching system, we'd be looking at 3 holding tanks. And this plan here kind of shows the 3 structures built to the exact dimensions of the existing. What we would need to do is we'd need to do a single well that would be shared by all 3 properties. We have 3 holding tanks. The holding tank for number 26, there's no way we can locate it on the property. It would have to be done by an easement. And obviously, we didn't go to a great extent of grading these all out, but in order to get these holding tanks in, we would at a minimum need some retaining walls just to kind of hold back those existing grades around the holding tanks, which we've kind of identified here. And then what I tried to do is just give you a quick summary of alteration. And there's a couple categories here. We looked at building area, we looked at impervious area, total alteration, alteration within the 50-foot, and tree removal. And in these columns here, we have what's existing. We ran through what this alternative would be, and we've shown what the proposed is, which as presented, the initial as we see as providing the most benefit from an environmental standpoint, and we kind of covered some other categories under the waiver request. Real quick, the building area, existing building area is 2,290 square feet. Obviously, the alternative would be the same because we'd be building on the same foundation. By doing a single building on all three lots, we'd be looking at 1,500 square feet, which is a 34% reduction in the overall building area. As we look at impervious area, both the existing and alternative would be just over 2,000 square feet. What we initially have proposed is 1,730, which is a 20% reduction. I also point out that part of our filing is we've also added stormwater mitigation to directly recharge any runoff from the building as well as the driveway on site. As we look at alteration that would be required to add the holding tanks, based on that alternative would be just over 7,000 square feet. What we proposed is 3,700 plus or minus, which is about a 48% reduction in the overall alteration. And it's a 51% reduction of alteration required in the 50-foot setback. And again, just looked at tree removal. Our initial proposal, we proposed 7 trees, which we provided mitigation for. This alternative would require 12 trees, and it just gets a little bit more difficult adding new significant trees. We could certainly do plantings, but we'd be using up a lot more of that area for 3 separate buildings and septic systems. So at this point, hoping you've had a chance to kind of read through the narrative that we submitted last week. What we'd like to do is just get your comments and continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the members of the commission have questions or comments?
I don't want to cut anybody off, but the other thing just to add too is I believe there was some letters also received by some of the neighboring properties.
Yeah, Brandon, I think in our file, we've got at least 5.
Can you summarize what they say?
In short, yes, they all say, and sorry, Brandon, and maybe I could, I don't mean to step on your toes, but they all speak in favor of it. I believe I can't say I can recite them each in detail, but each one in some way, shape, or form recounts the fact that these 3 houses that are proposing to be replaced are currently not habitable. And I think that's sort of overselling their current condition, if anything. And so the abutters or neighbors are happy to see something positive done with this property.
Is there anybody also attending Zoom that have comments? Are there any member of the public here or not?
I don't see any hands. Oh, wait. GKMCK has a hand. Oh, we have a couple.
That's
All right.
Gail.
So it's
Can
who?
you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, please. State your name and your address.
Gail McKenna, 29 Cricket Lane. I
Thank you.
spoke at
Go
the
ahead.
last meeting. Haven't written the letter. I figured verbal was enough, but this has been a sore point for many years. I've been here since '82. And only one cottage was sort of used. I've even had somebody come up and try and claim one of the properties, pounded in a sign and said, "I'm taking over." We had to disabuse him of that, but this is such an improvement for the neighborhood and for the pond itself. It clears up. There's a lot more open land. So you can guess I am totally supportive.
Great. Thank you. Great. And then it looks like Mrs. McKenna, if you're done, we'll move on to Bob Flannery. Bob, just state your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Bob Flannery. I own 22 Cricket Lane. I think Gail pretty much said everything that I'm going to say. The houses are in a severe state of disrepair. And the proposal put forth is in my opinion, a very solid choice in both improving the land there as well as the ecology of the area. That's basically all I needed to say. Everything else has kind of been stated already.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Do any commission members have any questions or comments that they want to make?
I do. Brandon, the existing buildings, sorry I couldn't make the site walk, but the three that are coming down, is there any need for any sort of assessment or evaluation of those building materials? And then how are those proposed to be disposed of or demoed? I mean, are we talking like knock all three down and have three big piles and then worry about getting them offsite, or are they going to be kind of dismantled and loaded out actively? I don't see any like a proposed lay down area stockpile for demo, I guess.
Sure. So in order to raise each one of the structures, they're going to have to apply for a demolition permit, which, as you pointed out, given the age of these structures, they're most likely going to require some sort of testing, typically lead paint, arsenic. You know, there's a whole list of things that they'll have to go through, and they'll key in on, prior to that being done and prior to them issuing that permit to demolish the building. When they take these down, it'll probably be an excavator, with a thumb on it, and they'll basically be tearing it down and placing it right into a dumpster, which it can be just hauled directly off site. None of it's going to obviously be disposed of on site. It all needs to be trucked off in the most efficient way. And how that's typically done is they're just right from the building footprint to the dumpster.
I guess my concern would be results of any sort of assessment that's done. If we are talking lead paint, or I don't want to say the A word, asbestos, but if something like with how close these are to the resource area or in the resource area, I guess I would like to see how that stuff is going to be handled.
Yeah, so typically what happens is if there was anything that they identified within the existing structures prior to demolishing, they would actually have to hire a company to kind of come in and remove all that. There's a chain of custody. I mean, as you said, there's a whole set of environmental rules and regulations on, how they contain. It could be anything from dust, to air quality, during the removal of those, as well as transporting those off-site. And it would be a licensed contractor that specifically deals in that removal. Once that's all done, at that point, they would move on to a typical demolition contractor, which is just going to come down and break the building down and haul it off.
Perfect. Thank you.
Kyle, in that regard, my biggest concern for hazardous building materials is the number 26, the lowest elevation one. My understanding from Brandon is that one was constructed in the 50s, whereas the 28 and 30 were constructed more like in the 20s or 30s. Am Am I getting that about right, Brandon?
I believe that is here. I know it's in our narrative.
But anyway, that
Yeah.
number 26 was sort of unfortunately constructed when the use of hazardous building materials was at its nexus. So, yeah, there you go. 1960 versus 30 and 30.
Yeah, that would be very unfortunate if that were the case. I would like to hear or have those results presented. Again, I understand that they would take the appropriate, that they're required to do it. I just, knowing that it's in a resource area, I'd like to hear that's happening or see if the containment has been installed appropriately or whatnot.
Hi, this is Anna. I'm also wondering, are all three of those on slab because it's so close to the water, or do they have any sort of foundation? And if so, are you going to have to truck soil onto the property to just fill the holes, basically?
Sure, I haven't extensively been through all three, but particularly as you can look in and see 30, it's essentially crawl spaces. So there would be, some soil that would need to be, we proposed to restore the grades to essentially what would have been there prior to that, the building. So there certainly would be some material that would have to be imported and spread on site.
Okay, I guess, yeah. Just be careful where that soil comes from. This is my point.
Are you thinking of knotweed and invasives, Anna?
Knotweed, invasives, and contaminants.
Yeah, just any sort of, I would think that it should be submitted to the contractor, showing that it's clear of that stuff, but.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more common to make sure your fill is clean versus doesn't have invasive species. I think that is something that's essential here, given the location. I do share the concerns as well with the building materials, and one additional building material is often the window caulking and sealing contained PCBs in the 60s. So that would be another one to look into. And, again, I think the standard of care is pretty robust, but it's often from a, human health standpoint, so I think the resource area just makes it that much more critical. And this is our drinking water too. We have wells just right up the pond, as I think most are aware of. I would also, one observation is, if the existing structures were not there, these structures would never be approved, today. So, I think reducing the impervious surfaces in this area, there is a positive benefit to the resource area, restoring 2 of the lots, and building 1 house. Although I do recognize from a housing standpoint, it's not ideal, but I think here there's clearly a benefit to the environment by removing those structures from the lakefront.
Can I jump in and comment on that real quick, Julie?
Please do. Absolutely.
So Brandon, I was one of the commissioners who had asked you to sort of show us what the alternatives looked like. And my struggle with this project is that when I look at these 3 lots, I think it's pretty easy to get my head around that the proposed plan is an improvement. However, the waiver you're looking for to work within the 50 feet 50-foot buffer is not stipulated or conditioned simply on it being an improvement. Rather, you need to meet a couple of very specific requirements. One, what's most relevant to you anyway, is that it needs to be in the public interest. And we use "and" here, and among other things, the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative. So when I look at just this lot, I can get my head around the public interest piece. The problem for me is that when I look across Littleton and I look at the intent of our bylaws, I see that public interest in this specific lot being offset by more or less creating a new exception to our bylaw that says that you can buy up 3 existing lots and use that existing square footage to create something new. I understand it's technically a reconstruction, but new within the 50-foot buffer. And I don't think that that is within the intent of the bylaw here. And so I'm ultimately, because I see those two things offsetting, I don't think I can approve this project or vote in favor of it. But what I will say is that if the commission is going to go forward and authorize this project to go forward, we need to make it explicitly clear that the only reason that this is even in the realm of acceptable is because these 3 houses are not currently habitable. That is, we are not carving out an exception to our 50-foot buffer that says anyone can buy 3 existing houses, consolidate them, and build what they want using the consolidated square footage. That, I think, would be a gross abuse of our bylaws, and frankly, of the intent of the Conservation Commission and the voters here. And so, if we are going to condition this, if the rest of the commissioners do find this ultimately to be in the public interest and the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative, I think we need to make it abundantly clear why this project is very narrowly acceptable, whereas doing something similar with 3 habitable structures would in no way, shape, or form be acceptable.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Chase. However, we have approved work within the 50 that replaces a house in kind, or at least the footage, the footprint. And in this case, he's reducing the footprint of the existing houses. So I think it does fit into what we've approved in the past within the 50.
But Anna, they're doing that by acquiring 3 properties and consolidating them. They're using simply that line of argument. There would be nothing to stop someone from purchasing 3 houses immediately next to Long Lake and using and raising the 3 of them and building up one single mega structure there using the consolidated footprints of those 3 houses.
Well, but they do also have to show an environmental, do all the alternatives and have the least damaging alternative, which, consolidating all 3 and making, equal impervious would not be an improvement. It would. No. You could take 3 houses adjacent to Long Lake and do the same calculations, 3 habitable houses, and say, listen, these 3 houses add up to 10,000 square feet. I'm only going to build a 6,000 square foot house, and I'm going to get rid of 2 driveways, and I'm going to improve the impervious area. But at the end of the day, we've taken 3 existing habitable structures, and we've created one mega structure there using this exact same line of thinking, that simply reducing the number of structures and reducing the impervious area is itself, by definition, in the public interest.
Right, I agree, Chase. I think the difference, well, not the difference, but I think our whole purpose here is that we get to look at each of these projects on a case-by-case basis, right? So I don't think we're necessarily opening some sort of a loophole where exactly what you just said. There's no way that I would condone a project that would knock down 3 currently habitable living spaces to build one larger structure. Whether it's in a resource area or not, that's just not something I would like to see happen. But I think where we're able to look at these case by case, this seems to have checked off those boxes for me.
And I appreciate that. You know, I don't mean to belabor the point. I just want to make it clear that I think we need to follow the letter of the law here in both the public interest, consistency with the bylaw, and the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative.
And we should be able to lay out that if you're all agreeable within the findings that are usually in this thing, why the waiver is being issued. It could be very specific that there's a 34% reduction in impervious and other criteria that are being used for the public interest piece.
I think that's the only thing I just want to make sure we get said tonight is I understand where you're coming from, Jason. I know we've talked at length at this, and I appreciate your comments. The only thing I would just point out in terms of this specific site is the removal of 3 separate structures to create a mega structure. Because I think one of the things that we tried to point out in looking at the overall calculations here is, albeit the proposed house is larger than what's currently on number 30, you know, I don't think it would be considered a mega structure. And just looking at the square footages here and the reductions of what we have, you know, it's actually quite a bit less impervious area, total alteration, square footage of house. You know, we really tried to work to reduce those numbers to demonstrate that in the end, it's more beneficial. So just want to point that out.
No, and that's a good qualification, Brendan. And I do agree that should go into the findings, because should we be presented with a similar circumstance, I think the fact that we're decreasing the amount of impervious area, we're decreasing the amount of structure footprint by substantial amounts is a big reason why I can see, when I look at just this project itself, it's easy to reach a finding that this is the right choice. I'm simply concerned about opening the door to an exception in our bylaw that we never intended. And mega is probably not a fair application to this particular project.
I'm actually more comfortable reading the finding for this than the finding for 16 Middlesex, where the deck got replaced by a kitchen.
Yep. Yep, I would agree with that assessment, Amy. Chase, I think you also, make a really good point regarding precedent, because, yes, we very much, look at it's case by case. Every site is different. Every factor is a bit different, but it does need to stand up, to muster as well, to make sure we're, consistently applying, so I think that point is well taken. All right. Is there any further discussion? Do we need additional information?
Do you mind if I ask just 2 questions?
Yep.
Brandon, do you know when they do the demolition, are they gonna have to sort the material on site, or would it all go in the dumpster and they sort it later in terms of wood and concrete and metal and all that stuff?
Typically, depending on the size of the structures, but with houses of this size, I would say that it's sorted off-site. It'd strictly be removed and then sorted.
And can you throw the landscape plan back up again real quick, your planning plan? Is the area proposed where the two houses are coming down to be grass? What's the final disposition down there?
So, I mean, I guess certainly, Peter, feel free to chime in on what your desire is. You know, as I look at that, there's not a whole lot in the way of existing quote unquote lawn on the site. Obviously, the desire would be to maintain it in a way, obviously, that it doesn't become overrun. You know, like we talked a little bit about invasive vegetation, but any even undesired vegetation. But what that finished product look like, I guess we're kind of open to some discussion. The way I would see it is obviously kind of around, you know, the building footprint here. You know, it lend itself better to more of a lawn situation where, you know, we've got an opportunity to do something down here, maybe to kind of keep that low manicured growth in and around the plantings.
Where is the access to the pond? Where's the access to the pond going to be?
So right now, we're proposing to leave these. There's an access point here. I would imagine, Peter, is that kind of what you're looking to maintain?
Yeah, we'd like to keep it as natural as possible. You know, just we're open to any and all suggestions. You know, Brandon's been great through all of this, and would continue to follow his feedback and yours as well.
I am noticing it looks like a 40 or 60 foot pine is kind of in the area, not quite in the middle of the trees, but
40 inch. Yep.
Yep, that one.
Yep.
Oh, 40 inch. Okay, so that's very tall if it's 40 inch DBH.
Yes. Yep.
So is the I'd imagine a lot of pine needles and acidic soil. I guess the house is right there at the moment, but
Yeah, it would certainly influence all the soil around there. It's definitely going to be more acidic.
at least if it doesn't start that way, it will become that way. So it seems like you need to look at something that, you know, is conducive to that pine. You know, because you're gonna bring in soil, and it won't be it's acidic at first, and it certainly will need to be stabilized.
Sure. I mean, depending on what's planted there, I mean, most grass, anything like that, I mean, it may periodically require, you know, lime, obviously, to spread. But again, there's certainly, we've got some high bush blueberry kind of in that area, which obviously can deal with that acidic soil quite well.
I think it should be abundantly, it should be stated, because it's not always clear to everyone, that application of fertilizers here, I don't know about the implications of lime, but the applications of fertilizers here would be something that we would pay a lot of attention to, given its proximity to the resource area.
Yeah, we've been advising only organic, slow release fertilizers, if any.
That would be generally one of the continuing conditions on the order conditions,
Right.
in perpetuity. And you have no need for a shed or anything like that.
I don't see the need for one.
So in terms of initially at the moment, just to clarify, in terms of revegetation, not including the trees, obviously given the slopes that are through there, you know, one of the things we're looking for is a vegetated slope. So that would be some sort of a grass to be planted in there that can, you know, provide that structure and filtering capability for any rainwater that comes through there.
Sorry, where are you talking about planting grass?
So once we remove these houses, there's, we've obviously got some existing trees, we've got some proposed plantings around here. But this is obviously going to be disturbed. There's a house here, there's a house here. We're going to have to reloam. And so obviously we're going to need to seed that.
Well, Amy, could you help them with a nice naturalized seed for that area? Because it's within the 50, so it would need.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about under the pine trees. That's sort of why I brought it up is if you all want to think about that. But with the pine trees, as Julie pointed out, I'd be a little bit at loss. I mean, is there a certain area you would want not mowed more than a year? Or, I mean, it's not a big area. But especially that lower area is in the floodplain, but it's also where the steps are going to be.
They could just put a path to the steps maybe and just let it naturalize otherwise.
I think
But
that's
yeah.
I think that's a great idea, and that's something that would be happy to do.
So hearing that, I mean, obviously there's plenty of conservation seed mixes that we know that obviously are going to be native, mowable. But if we do a path, obviously it'd just be kind of looking at the mowing, minimally just to kind of maintain that cover, and kind of rely on a path area that kind of connects, around the living area to this point of access here.
Well, what about the conservation seed mix below elevation, give or take 176?
So, I mean, looking at 100-year floodplain,
Or wherever that.
I don't have, in this area here, I don't really see it being, it's all sand and gravel through here. So I really don't see it being, where we want to go to some kind of a detention pond environmental mix or something like that if it was going to be inundated regularly. I would think just any kind of conservation mix would be able to, withstand, let's just say, in 20 years, we did have a significant flooding, for as long as that would be flooded and receded, I don't see any issues with the conservation mix.
Can we just condition this then on a seed mix to be approved by the conservation agent?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood the
we've
general
gone round and
parameters
round
of where
about it a
that would
bunch
be.
of times.
I assume that from 176, that steeper slope up to 180 would probably be more regular lawn grass type something.
Or couldn't it be a wildflower mix?
I would just go with kind of native grasses and a little bit of wildflowers. I don't know if they'd really take under there.
Yeah, I think some leeway regarding the actual site conditions with respect to the pine and the slopes, to be approved by Amy. And along those lines, the tree BMPs, do we include those automatically?
No, we don't. Although, did I send those to you, Brandon? Or was it somebody else I sent them to?
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had talked about the stockpile location with respect to the maple, and that's what Brandon had mentioned earlier.
Not to draw this out any further, but if we're done with that topic, there was one other thing when we were on site that I wanted to talk about. And that's to the southeastern portion, sort of where the word pond is along there. Brandon, did you get a chance to look into the shoreline versus the property line there? The reason I'm asking this is for the commissioner's benefit. There's a bunch of concrete rubble of some sort or another that may have some stabilizing effect on the shoreline, but is also
so
also big and and clearly anthropogenic and not engineered there. And we had talked about possibly trying to take it out, but there was some concern about where the property line is versus the shoreline.
Yes. So basically, you know, I went back, I just looked at the survey plans that we had on record, which identified, you know, several of these surrounding properties as well as our properties. And basically, this is kind of, you know, essentially no man's land here. You know, it's certainly not a situation where it's incorporated with one of the abutting parcels. So I don't foresee any issue, you know, if we're looking at doing some kind of mitigation to kind of remove, I guess, under the premise where it's this property that impacted that area anyway. So essentially it would just be kind of removing what at some point in history, you know, that ended up there. If that makes sense.
I would certainly see that as being to the public benefit of your project.
As long as it's not holding the bank up.
Right, exactly. We would need to make sure that the bank was stable after you did that.
So sort of a condition to remove the more surface debris?
Surface
around
debris
26?
that's accessible and, you know, that originated from this property.
Yeah.
Brandon, I'm sorry if you already addressed this, but do you have Board of Health approval for the holding tank?
So everything's been submitted to the Board of Health, but we have not had the actual Board of Health meeting as of yet.
Okay.
The only thing I can comment on that we kind of mentioned before is obviously we've had some initial input from the Board of Health because we went out and we did soil testing witnessed by the Board of Health. And during that discussion with Jim Gareffi, who's the agent from Neshoba, you know, his recommendation obviously is that, you know, a holding tank is the only solution here. And again, just given maximum feasible compliance and trying to accommodate that on this site, this location up here is the best location, mostly because they're going to need to pump and maintain that holding tank. And if we were to set it anywhere else down in this area, it becomes out of the realm of being able to pump due to the elevation change from the existing road to the lower part of that property.
So Brandon, just so you're probably aware, but if the Board of Health comes back with changes regarding, you know, the holding tank, location, you know, any of that, it seems like keeping this file open, you know, to make sure there aren't changes would be the way to go. It's what a lot of applicants, it's up to you, obviously, but just making you aware. If they make changes, it's a kind of significant undertaking to reopen this file.
Sure, and I completely understand where you're coming from, and obviously we've had a lot of sites where, let's just say, if there was more flexibility, and I had a concern that, you know, potentially, you know, there was going to be a modification. Obviously, I'd want to make sure this hearing was open so that we could adjust things and not getting into a situation where we have to amend an order of conditions. In this case, and again, I kind of leave it up to you as well, but you know, we had informal discussions with the Board of Health because the other thing was pertaining to, you know, obviously the existing wells for these properties were down here, so we knew we had to put the well down here. There was an issue with getting a well rig in, you know, which is why we had discussions with them, you know, looking at the location that we had. And really, this is the only place that we're going to be able to get that holding tank. So I'm comfortable, moving forward with you folks at this time.
I would also ask if the commission wants to review the findings after I write them before I issue the permit, because that's going to affect the timing here too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Amy. It's a pretty significant file.
Because if you vote to close tonight, which is fine, we would have to look at the findings next Monday, because otherwise I'm going to run out of the 21 days. Which is fine, just saying.
What, I don't think we've talked about this, Brandon or Peter, what's the timeline for this project that you'd like to achieve?
I know from Peter's standpoint, they would like to get underway as soon as possible. Obviously, as we pointed out, we're hoping to be before the Board of Health here very shortly.
Okay, so you're not permitting this for spring construction or something right now?
I think ideally, and again, we haven't had a lengthy discussion on actual timing of construction, but I know they're anxious to get underway. But I also point out that we're going to also need to get through Zoning Board of Appeals, which is why it's really helpful having gone through your board here, just given the proximity to the pond. So I guess to answer, ideally the fall, but we'll have to see how things time out.
Okay. So either we close it tonight, Amy, and then we have to look at conditions or findings rather on Monday?
Or both, but yeah. Because the next meeting is until September 13th. So that'll be out of my 21 days.
Okay. And there's no latitude for the applicant to extend that at their with their approval. It'd be nice if we could push it out to the meeting after.
Think about it a little bit.
Yeah. It would allow us to give them the vote, so to speak, tonight to close it.
I'm actually not sure, to tell you the truth, because any appeals would come within 10 days of when I issue the permit. So that floats out there. So I don't think it is an issue if the applicant says, that they're okay with allowing, and we don't get that chance anymore because under COVID, we had all the time we needed, but that has gone away. But I think if the applicant is willing to go beyond the 21 day and maybe call it
25 days, right?
30 days. I don't know when the 13th is.
Yeah.
Do you get to subtract a day for the holiday? Does that count? Probably doesn't help anyways.
28 days from today. So we'd need 29 to ultimately issue them on September 14th.
Well, if it's 21 days, it's just calendar days. If it's less than 10 days, it's working days. So the holiday, I don't think matters in the 21 days.
I mean, the other option is to give the applicant, feedback on, it sounds like we're moving forward with their permit, and to just let them know we'll vote on it in a week. Would that help from a timeline standpoint?
I think that can make a big difference. And if it comes up in the meantime, I can also let Board of Health and or ZBA, if you need it in that time, know where the commission is, and we're just writing up the conditions and findings. Because the 13th, yeah, next week is, well, I don't know yet if Healy Corner is actually going to come in or not. But it's that and Grimes Lane and Cottage Way. And then, you know, possibly SVT. So it's not a terrible meeting, but
I mean, it seems like there are definitely a lot of details, you know, that we haven't hashed out from the findings standpoint, although it seems the commission is, from what I can tell, it's a, you know, favorable position on issuing the permit. You know,
we can probably go for it. If you want to close and vote tonight, I can get the special conditions and the findings out to you guys by Wednesday. And if there's more review after Monday, you know, I still have time to do that. And if you have a comment that you don't want to circulate to everybody, but just send to me, we can work on it that way a little bit too. That's perfectly fine. But as Chase said, you know, we want to make sure we get the findings right.
Right. Yeah, and typically we would be spending, you know, we often spend a decent amount of time on the details of the findings.
In any case, we're going to have to do the findings in one meeting, no matter what. So,
right.
Which is fine for next week. I think if you guys are willing to, you know, have a shorter time to look at it, to absorb it.
So Julie, do you need a motion to close the hearing on this?
Yeah, I need a motion either to close the hearing tonight, or if there's discussion or if commissioners have opinions on having additional discussion next week before closing it out. So continuing.
And if you are voting to close tonight, you don't need to vote to issue the order conditions as well as the waiver.
All right. What are your thoughts? Anyone have an opinion?
I'm fine closing it as long as Amy thinks she can get them done this week to take a look at it.
We took the words out of my mouth. That's just assuming we haven't put too much on Amy to get us.
Right. I'm really looking to Amy to answer this without putting any unnecessary pressure on her.
I've got a ton of sort of boilerplate findings that I can slip all this stuff into.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for 2830 Cricket Lane, Mass DP 2040938, and approve an order of conditions which include the waiver as discussed tonight.
I'll second.
All right, roll call. Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase.
Chase Gerbig, no.
Myself, I. Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
And Brian.
Brian Crowley, aye.
All right, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 1 nay.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
All right, so I will put discussions of findings and order conditions on the agenda for Monday night, next Monday night, which will not be public discussion, but obviously you guys are more than welcome to listen in.
All right, sounds good.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Have a good night.
Good
Have a
night.
good night. And actually, guys, before we start the
Alright.
next hearing, I've got to cut out to a little early. We still have a quorum, right?
As long as no one else leaves.
Everybody else stay put. All right, well, have a good night, everybody.
Okay.
Good night, Andrew.
You too. Good night, Andrew. All right. Looks like this is the last one. So open the public hearing, request for amended order of condition, Sudbury Valley Trustees, Smith Property at 199 Whitcomb Ave, Mass DEP file number 204-920 for habitat improvement
I
by control.
think it is.
Oh. Reducing abundance of the invasive oriental bittersweet by cut, stump, and spot herbicide foliar treatment. So who's here to present this one?
Good evening. I'm Laura Mattei. I'm the Director of Stewardship with Sudbury Valley Trustees. Amy, can I show my PowerPoint slide and share my screen? Do I have
That'd be
permission?
great.
Thank you.
Nope, you should be able to do it.
One second. I wanted to start by just talking about the common goals that we have for the Smith Conservation Land and Littleton community. I know that everyone in our virtual room has the goal of protecting human and environmental health, promoting healthy plants, wildlife, and ecosystems, and promoting the reestablishment of native plants, native pollinators, birds, and wildlife at this site in particular. And because of those common goals, I think it's a really powerful community that's been working on this project on many different aspects of the project. And that's also why SVT was appreciative of the neighbors and some folks who expressed some concerns about our initial proposal. And as you know, we've done a lot of due diligence, researching what we're doing, looking at all sorts of alternatives to how to control the bittersweet, and really checking in with other practitioners and conservation ecologists as well. Why are we requesting this amendment at this time? Three primary reasons. One piece is that we were able to complete a site-specific risk assessment since the October hearings, and that was conducted by a professional environmental toxicologist, a senior risk assessor, and she was able to look at very specifics of what we're doing at this site. I especially appreciated that it looked at the water situation as well. And we believe this adequately addresses a lot of questions that the commissioners, I think, were still lingering for you last October. A second major reason is looking at the feasibility of mechanical only techniques. I'm glad that some of you were able to come and see the work that we've been doing. The cutting technique of carbon starvation is, I don't think, such a great way to go because the bittersweet grows so vigorously after cutting and we're just not able to keep up with it. The root extraction technique, I will be continuing, but it is very time consuming. At the current rate, it might take us 100 hours per acre, which I'm really hoping we can improve on, but that is our current rate. And some safety issues have also arisen at the site for the workers or volunteers in the form of poison ivy, one volunteer going to an emergency room, and also in terms of tick-borne illnesses, which can really have devastating consequences to people. So we really want to keep people safe. So there definitely are limitations in terms of time and safety. And then finally, just acknowledging that the commission has recognized that herbicide use can be an acceptable tool in certain circumstances. And I understand that the commission did approve the use of herbicides inside some wetland resource areas, and we are only proposing to use them in buffer zones. These are just some photos from our site visit. It was really great to have a few of the commissioners, some stakeholders and neighbors join us for the site visit so that you could see exactly what we've been doing, trying to show you the root extraction method in the right there, and what's involved in that. And also, again, I think it's really important to, consider the magnitude of the problem, just how much bittersweet there is over how many acres and what we're trying to do, again, positively to rejuvenate this resource. So what we're asking in terms of the amendment is essentially going back to what we originally proposed. And I'm focusing on the wetland jurisdictional areas in my presentation this evening. So phase 1 would be the first year. And I want to bring up the map because I know it's hard to keep everything straight in your minds. So phase 1 is looking at unit 1, which is up here to the north in the Red Pine area. The wetland resource area is over here by Beaverbrook Marsh. The light blue line is the wetland delineation. The skinny line in the middle is the 50-foot zone. So the cross-hatching is the 0 to 50 feet. And then the brighter blue line is the 100-foot zone area. In the Red Pine Plantation in Unit 1, we are going to stick with mechanical only. I want to follow that through and see how that does by itself over time. In Unit 2 is where we are requesting that we be able to use cut stump application in the 0 to 100-foot buffer, and then following with a very targeted foliar application as needed in the 50 to 100 area. And going back just to give you a summary on that, the first year fall treatment cut stump would be 3.5 acres. That's all in Unit 2. And then the following summer, again, only in Unit 2, 2 acres of, as limited as possible, just treating the low foliar growth. Sometimes what I've done in the past to really limit the use of herbicides is actually to mow some of those low growths, because you can condense essentially the regrowth so that when you do the foliar application, it's more effective and you use less herbicide. We will be hand pulling seedlings throughout the year as much as we can, so those are easily pulled. And there would be a maximum of 3 at most foliar applications. And I think it's important to emphasize that it's very standard that when you do this, you reduce the amount each year dramatically in how much herbicide you're using. And it's also important to emphasize that initially we're not using that much herbicide per acre. And that's one of the factors that does make this a safe alternative. Then in a subsequent phase, and I haven't timed this phase yet on purpose because we want to see how things go in the first units. We'd like the neighbors and stakeholders to see how things go before we proceed. But when we do proceed, that would be in units 4 and 5. So 4 is on the west side of Whitcomb Avenue, 5 is on the east. And actually, I've taken this buffer zone out of the unit 5 because in fact, I'm going to only do mowing here. So it'll only be mechanical, not herbicide use in here. This is primarily maintained as a field, and we will continue to do that. And we did cut this area, for example, over here, outside of the wetland area, and we're just going to be mowing that to maintain it. Even though the bittersweet will still be growing, at least we keep it from going to seed. So unit 4, the other request of our amendment is to repeal that additional 100-foot buffer to the vernal pool that the commission had requested last fall. The reason to request that repeal is because the Heritage Program and other ecologists really believe that our approach is safe and would not harm the vernal pools and the wildlife that use them. And this technique has been used in this manner before. And again, and then the treatment would be the same idea as in phase 1. First year fall treatment, 1.2 acres, cut stump and paint the herbicide. And then the second year, again, not in the 0 to 50, but in the 50 to 100 of using the very limited foliar application. And then if we look at the map again, to summarize, phase 1 is continue mechanical in unit 1. It's cut stump through these buffers with foliar in 50 to 100. And then phase 2 would really just be in unit 4. And we have already begun and will consistently be using also mechanical work in this woodland border as well to maintain that. So, and then just again to emphasize that this is what we propose is a positive environmental impact that will not harm the human health or the wildlife. And we know that that falls in your bylaw to do something that is in the public interest, including invasive species control and restoration of habitat. So thank you, and I invite any questions.
Great, thank you, Laura. So first we'll take questions and comments from the commission, and then we'll move on to public comment. And we will, just a reminder that, we'll be discussing this within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, which is our wetlands and vernal pools and buffer zones. So if any commissioners have questions or comments, please go ahead.
Yeah, Julie, if I can jump in first. Laura, could you summarize the findings of the risk assessment for me, particularly in the context of transport properties and water impacts associated with these two herbicides?
I don't have it memorized, so if you'll
no, that's okay. And I'm not asking for a detailed risk assessment language basis, but
so you're looking for potential for migration to public and private drinking water wells, is that correct?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to see what was in here that would more specifically answer your question. She found that at the rate and with the method of application, so there's two studies in particular. Well, not only did the in their analysis of the chemicals and their transport, so they have a limited half-life. Forgive me, I'm stuttering because there's a lot in this report. So there's a limited half-life, and then it's a limited amount. So we're looking at that combination of how much is being applied, what's the breakdown time, and then what's the potential for it to reach a resource of concern. So with those factors is how they conduct the risk assessment. So at this site, we're using small amounts, and based on the properties, it wouldn't reach the public or the resident. And actually, in this case, the residential wells aren't even within the scope of this because they're away from any of the applications. But the public water supply is 1.5 miles away. One of the things that I found compelling was the study for Eastham, as well as that was a modeling study. And then they also did a study in Barnstable County where they didn't find any of the herbicides in the drinking water at all. At the rate and with the method of application, the herbicides used in the rights of way will not result in herbicide concentrations in ground and surface water that would cause harm to humans and aquatic wildlife. But I think it's important to note that they didn't find any.
And that risk assessment looked at both the private wells that are depicted here and the public wells. Is that correct?
It did. Yes, it did.
Thank you.
Laura, did it look at daughter products too?
So the EPA review looks at those breakdown products, and this risk assessment then takes that into account. So I did look again at that EPA review, and they do look at the breakdown products, and they determine that those in fact don't cause, they aren't going to be traveling in a way that causes concern.
Okay. I did notice in one of the documents you provided, it looked like it was like a 36-inch limit, and it just wasn't clear to me whether that was the herbicide itself or the breakdown product. So that was why I was asking that question.
Right. Hold on one second, because I want to see if I had additional information here. So for the aerobic metabolism of triclopyr in sandy loam soil, which is pretty similar to what we have, the half-life is less than 60 days. And that's the breakdown product.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, what do you mean that's the breakdown product? You mean it's usually
when I was looking at Appendix A in the EPA review, discusses the degradates and their fate. And I just made a note of this because I knew this was of concern to the commission. So that was on page 138. It's called triclopyr ROC, has a half-life of less than 60 days.
Wait, the ROC is the daughter product?
That's my understanding.
Because yes, that's what I remember from the EPA report, is that one of the daughter products was one of the longer lived contaminants which is what would actually end up being transported in the groundwater.
I think the issue from the way I look at it is it has to actually get to the groundwater. So it's going into the plant. There's a lot of breakdown in the plant. Then some of it might get to the soil, and there's additional breakdown. So the question would be, how would it get to the groundwater at that point? And would it move?
Yeah, so you're saying that the risk assessment doesn't go into that. It's just the EPA report, right?
The risk assessment goes into a number of different factors, including the EPA report, but she doesn't go into a specific review of the daughter products. But again, it's based on a lot of those studies that looked at the fate and transport.
ROC is residue of concern. I was just trying to look that up. So I think,
don't know, sorry, go on.
no, it's okay. Just the way I'm reading this, I think triclopyr residue of concern is the triclopyr itself and the half-life of the triclopyr itself, and not the breakdown products. Just for clarification purposes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I mean, I guess with that additional information, you know, at least I might be comfortable with cut and dab within the 50 to 100. I'm still hesitant to allow that within the 50 is my, my feeling.
I agree with that, Anna. Laura, I was actually going to ask you, could you talk a little bit about the nature of the bittersweet in the 0 to 50? I thought when we were out there, I can't remember who it was, but somebody stated that there actually wasn't a lot of bittersweet growth in that 0 to 50 zone.
In the 0 to 50 zone, in the unit 1, it's pretty thick. We're only doing mechanical there.
Yep.
In the unit 2, there was less bittersweet, less of the lower growth in that 0 to 50.
Okay. Yep.
I think the main thing, though, with the cut and dab that's really helpful is it gets the big stems. And you can't, even the originator of the root excavation won't try to excavate those, and he'll use triclopyr. So I think that's an important tool to use. And again, I really would emphasize that we're using very low amounts of herbicide, and the risk assessment, you're really looking at how much you're using, what's the toxicity, and what's the actual chance that it can reach a target of concern.
Well, what about, are you willing to modify your method within the 0 to 50 to just cut and dab and no foliar spray within the 0 to 50?
That is my proposal, Anna. In the 0 to 50 is only cut and dab.
Okay, so that would only be the larger stems, because what I understand is the smaller stems, you can't use that method.
Right.
So what are you going to, so you're going to use the mechanical method for those?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. And one of the, I thought it was interesting, one of the neighbors pointed out at our site visit, she was hoping that the cut and dab would reach some of the smaller stems, which definitely could possibly happen. In the sense, if it's connected to the root, that is.
So I have a question. I unfortunately was unable to make the site visit. One of the outstanding questions in my mind, and kind of the way we evaluate some of these projects, I think we look, very much. I do lots of field work for my job. We have tick gators, we have all sorts of PPE for ticks, and yet people still get Lyme, and it is very debilitating.
Yes.
And then my husband has to go to the hospital for prednisone for poison ivy. He's gotten it so much.
Right.
So I'm acutely aware of both of those things. But one of my questions was, we also, I appreciated your slides where you say we share common goals for the environment and human health. Bittersweet is detrimental to the environment. And I think, for me, I try to balance it with, really if there really isn't another choice. And, I think the pictures that were shown, you just see this canopy of bittersweet. And so I was just wondering if anybody had any input or comments on, as far as an alternatives analysis, are we at the point where we know that we really need to bring in some bigger guns? So I just wasn't sure if anybody had any thoughts or input from that standpoint.
We had looked at a whole suite of alternatives. And I had put that information up on our website, and I'm sure I shared it with the commission in terms of a variety of different mechanical approaches that have been tried. And And unfortunately, a lot of them are followed up with herbicides because they're not successful. Absolutely, we've been able to see that mechanical only can be effective in small areas. It could also be effective if, you know, you're just trying to keep an area open that doesn't have as much bittersweet, but even in that case, the bittersweet encroaches. Is that the kind of alternatives you were asking about, Julie?
Yeah, I mean, I think when, you know, you've been at this for a year, and obviously there have been some outside challenges, but, you know, I was just looking for additional input because I think for us, you know, we tried to use other alternatives if there are some. So that was
Right.
really all I was asking.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and doesn't the proposal in front of us include blending different alternatives to minimize the application of herbicides? Right. I mean, that
Yes.
the
Yes. It
takeaway that we've
absolutely
got here is
does.
that mechanical work,
It absolutely does.
carbon starvation kind of doesn't work, or if it does work, it's such a long cycle that it might as well not work.
Well, it's really, really hard to keep up with that repeated cutting. The bittersweet grows so aggressively. And like I said, the root extraction, I think, is pretty darn good, but it's really time consuming. And I've looked into goats in so many different ways. It's a combination of cost and effectiveness, and goats as they're really more of a initial mechanical. So it's kind of like an intensive mowing when you use goats, and they're also just really cute. So people, like to do it when they can. And I haven't ruled that out, but the one other, but again, that would not work for like the full complement of restoration over this area, because they'll eat everything. And our goal is really to restore some natural forest habitat here.
Yeah, and I guess I see this, Julie, to your comment about alternatives, right? If Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're looking for a couple of years of applications, 3 years of herbicide applications.
So the cut and dab is going to really be the piece that really helps us get a jump start. And then there's the first year following the cut and dab where you do a fuller application. And that again will get anything that you weren't able to get with the cut and dab. And then after that, the amount of herbicides you do reduces tremendously. And I'm committed to a maximum of 3 years, because part of what we're doing here is we do want something that's sustainable. We do want to get back to a native ecosystem here, and it will be a long-term management, because we also have trees that are not native to the area. So we need to pull those out. We need to see what native plants come back in. We may need to do some planting, but we're hoping that the native plants will come back.
So I guess my take here is that unless we're willing to lose ground to the invasives, this seems to strike a balance between herbicide application, minimizing it to the extent practical, especially in the 0 to 50, right, where we're not looking at the foliar applications and so on. Still keeping up some of the mechanical where it's appropriate and effective in long term, decreasing it. So unless there are other alternatives that we should look at that haven't come up, I don't know how much more sort of feasibility study type analysis could be done here.
Well, I know Laura has looked at other alternatives exhaustively, I think, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, it was also, you mentioned losing ground. That was something that I was kind of wondering about as well. It's just been,
right.
I mean, my flower garden's a jungle this year.
Yeah, I mean, the ecologists and the practitioners really recommend that we do the whole site at once. but we've decided not to do that in deference to concerns of the community. You know, we're also trying to balance how can we possibly win this battle and not and still make some progress without, you know, causing, you know, our community to feel threatened by what we're doing.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions by commissioners? Otherwise, I can open it to the public. All right, I'll take that as a no. I don't know if there are any members of the audience who have comments. If so, just make sure you state your name and your address or the entity you're associated with, please.
Hi, I'm Kathy Stevens from the Lilton Conservation Trust. And I'd like to basically just read the letter that we submitted. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to read it, but in favor of the proposal. It says Lilton Conservation Trust is writing this letter in support of the Sudbury Valley Trustees' revised management plan and request and your approval of the amended order of conditions for planned operations in the wetlands area under the State Wetland Protection Act. As a holder of the conservation restriction on the Smith property and a driving force behind its preservation, the Lilton Conservation Trust stands behind the landowners, SVT's, efforts to restore health to the land while respecting the concerns of the neighbors. LCT has worked closely with SVT in controlling invasives on the Smith's property. SVT has done an excellent job in exploring alternative approaches, including responsible and limited herbicide use in the buffer zone, as determined after considerable vetting with public agencies and private authorities. We have full faith in the science presented and hope to move forward with the Commission to educate people here in town about invasive species and their control and expand control efforts on our own lands. SVT's revised management plan merits approval, which we fully support. And with much consideration for everything you do, appreciation for it, we support the effort.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right, I'll take that as a no. All right.
Julia, sorry, Laura, it's Kyle Max. I have one quick question about the timing.
Yes.
So if we were to go forward with this, it would be the cut and dab within the 0 to 50 and then the fuller outside that 0 to 50, but that would be a year later. Is that what you said?
I'm sorry, it's the cut. I didn't quite catch what you said, but it's the cut and dab is in the fall.
Yep.
And then the following summer,
Okay.
you would do the foliar application.
So as far as seeing results from the cut and dab, how long, what's the time frame? But obviously,
right. Because it's done in the fall, so it's done in the dormant season. What we would see is in the next year, it would be a combination of not seeing the regrowth from the cut and dab, but there would have been plants because they hadn't been cut and dab that would still be growing. So because they were too small to begin with.
Okay. I guess I was just curious if we would see, do we see updates from you guys?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I will provide updates. And in fact, now that you've asked that question, I am doing some plot monitoring, but maybe what I could do is some additional photo monitoring that might help you and us be able to see those changes over time.
Laura, if we were to condition some check-in, say a year from now or something like that, when would be the right time to evaluate the efficacy of these approaches? Essentially, what we don't want to do is go apply herbicide and then find out that it's not accomplishing anything, which I don't think anybody expects. But.
Right, yeah. So I think that if we have, if you have a full year, I think it's a nice time to check in. We're not done in a full year, but I think we can, and I'd be happy to share with you, what results we have seen and how that's going.
Yeah, I'd certainly be interested to see it, understand.
So that would be, and so when I say that, I'm thinking like fall of 22. So after the summer treatment, and then I could kind of show photos, and I'm actually going to set up some additional plots too, just so we can have some more information to share.
Yeah, as Chase was indicating, and Julie, that I'm really interested in the comparison study between number 1 and number 2, the mechanical versus the cut and dab, and just because for our interest in
absolutely
the resource areas, I'm really interested in seeing the difference, or if any.
Right. Yeah.
Are you going to be having a detailed report about that and comparing?
I can absolutely prepare a report that next fall in the 2022.
Okay. That'd be great.
And we're also going to have, there are other case studies that you can also look at where they've been successful with the use of herbicides.
Can we talk a little bit about the vernal pools?
Sure.
I guess the foliar application within 100 feet of the vernal pools is something that concerns me, because we have, just these sensitive amphibians with, their skin is much more sensitive. They're like the canary in the coal mine. I just really am not comfortable with the foliar application, because they, if they're in the area, it's just unavoidable for them to come in contact. Whereas cut and stump, is
I understand, I think, your question. And with the foliar application, it goes on the leaves of the target plant. And most of the salamanders are also, as you know, they essentially live underground. And they're probably not going to be out in the summertime when it's hot and dry. But more importantly, it's really targeted to those plants so that those animals wouldn't be impacted. And again, this is something that the endangered species biologists and other ecologists do not consider to be a concern to those critters.
Laura, do they not consider it to be a concern universally, or based on seasonal applications in which?
Essentially, because it's a very targeted application with a very small amount of herbicide, but also, as you know, the wood frogs, the salamanders will travel more than 100 feet from a vernal pool. So our ability to kind of monitor that, we do our best with that 100 or 200 foot buffer for those cases. But they haven't seen that the populations of the breeding amphibians have been impacted when the herbicides are used.
It also looks like most of the buffer zone in Unit 4, for a lot of it is field, not wood.
Yeah. At this area here, we actually have, it's this area. Oops. Well, some of it's field, some of it's woodlands.
So the field portion of that vernal pool buffer will be mowed?
This area, oops, this area that's open will stay open. That's right in here. Did that answer your question?
It's really a very small portion of the vernal pool buffer that is to be addressed then.
So this, no, that's just the field area. Maybe we're getting things confused here. So this area here is from the yellow line here and here, and then from the yellow line here. I'm trying to think of how to say this so you can see what I'm talking about. From this yellow line to this yellow line, there's the blue areas in between. That's the buffer zone. So this here would all be cut and dab, and then the foliar would be here. Here, the foliar is like about an acre, 1.2 acres, I think. Actually, I take it back. It's only 0.4 acres. So this area here is 0.4.
I guess what I mean by small amount, I mean proportionally to the whole circumference of the vernal pool.
Oh, yeah, way small, very small. Yeah, so yes, it's true. We don't know which way the amphibians might be going. Up here, over here, over here. Are there any other questions about that or comments?
So do we need to vote on the change?
Yeah, you need to vote on the amended order of conditions, which would include the amended waiver too, based on the parameters that Laura's described.
So the waiver, so Amy, the waiver that I submitted would be the same, right? I already
Yeah, I was just going to be helpful to bring up the parameters to make sure we know what we're looking at.
So it's the
Or
original, it's the same.
modifications.
Yeah, it's the same as the original. So within the 50-foot buffer zone, use cut stump herbicide treatment for larger vines followed by manual root extraction. And then within the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone, use cut stump treatment of larger vines followed by a foliar application using a battery backpack sprayer on low growth only as needed for a maximum of 3 years, 3 times, once a year. And then, so that's—
Sorry, Laura, could you say that again? Is it 3 times for 3 years?
So it's cut stump followed by a foliar application. The foliar application would not be performed more than 3 times, once per year over 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Laura, is it possible to define larger stumps? So where you're going to use the cut and dab versus where you're going to use—
Absolutely. So a pencil is too small. It gets bigger than a pencil, then you can probably cut and dab it.
Okay.
that's a rough guideline. It's just, if it's not a big enough surface, it's not really going to go far.
Sure.
Okay, are we going to move forward?
Yeah, I think so. We need, everybody's reading their notes, trying to come up with the right form of the motion. Or at least that's what I'm doing.
And
It is
I'm
just
wondering
to-
if,
Well, if you're gonna do it, is just to approve the request for amended order of condition. And I believe the only condition I really heard is about the reporting. Otherwise, all the other conditions will remain the same.
Correct, with an addition of a reporting requirement.
That condition, the reporting was, we weren't here after the fall of 2022, is that here? I thought, I'd like to hear something more. I'd like to hear how each phase is going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so if the cut and dab is happening this fall, I'd like to hear come in the spring, you know, how
Sure.
it went, what you're seeing.
Right.
as a result.
Sort of seasonal updates, but then a major
Yeah,
fall report.
exactly. Compilation of all that.
I'm also, I don't know, I'm wondering if we should have a reevaluation, you know, next fall, particularly for the herbal piece, the leaf spraying, which I think has the highest potential for, you know, transporting, you know, it does transport, perhaps not far. You know, I'm not sure how that happens, and I don't think we have a lot of science on the breakdown products either. So I think we do have a duty to make sure that, you know, this is going to do everything we hope it's going to do, in exchange for putting herbicide into our environment. You know, even though I recognize it's, you know, we're minimizing it. And I recognize that, you know, from a cost benefit standpoint, you know, I think we are in a place where we need some bigger guns. I'm not super comfortable with giving the green light for 3 years. You know, I think we've looked at some other projects and, you know, done 1 year and then reevaluated, and you know, I guess that's my thought on this one. You know, I'd
I
like
have
to
a question, just so I understand how you look at these things with the herbicide in the lakes that's been going on for years. How has that been evaluated in terms of the breakdown products and such?
Well, in the case of the lakes, there's really no other choice. It's in the water, and there's just no choice with the type of vegetation that's in there. Whereas on land, there are different tools.
Well, there are different tools for both on land and in the water. But yeah, herbicides are definitely are the more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, the bigger guns here are warranted.
I think, I guess a question I asked is in terms of your concerns, which I understand that you do have concerns. But I'm not sure that you were talking about breakdown products. Like what new information are you hoping for? Or what, I'm just trying to understand what the process will be moving forward.
And also consider right now, this amended order condition does not change the expiration date which would be what, October of 2023. Unless you ask for unless the expiration date is made.
Okay.
So there is only two years left on the order conditions right now.
I guess we're considering this change because, you've been at it for a year, are not making headway, and we share the goal that, we want to make headway.
I would say that
it's
not that we're not making headway. It's that we need the most effective tools in order to really make good progress. I think what we've demonstrated since just October, when you issued that order, is that we did our additional due diligence on the research on the chemicals and the risk assessment. And we feel very confident that that is not going to pose a risk. And then, we're going to continue to try to use the mechanical. We want to blend them and do our best with mechanical as we can. We've reduced the amount of area that we're using herbicides in significantly already. So what we're asking for is, I think it's very limited. I think it's very safe, if I dare say so. And I hope that you'll support us in this amendment.
Yeah, I think my concern just surrounds the breakdown products, which are more mobile, which was something we learned before, and those do not seem to have been included in the risk assessment. The ROCs was the residue of the triclopyr and not the breakdown products. And so my concern just
Are you requiring
Julie,
those risk assessments for the other resource areas?
Well, can we go back to something real quick on that before we address your question, Laura? The triclopyr breakdown products are addressed in the risk assessment, Julie, in the fate and transport section of it. And it specifically says that the prominent breakdown product of triclopyr is less mobile than triclopyr. So the breakdown products were not evaluated from an exposure perspective, but they were evaluated from a transport characteristics perspective.
Okay, so I may have had that reversed then, because I thought it was the reverse.
Thanks for that clarification, Chase. That helps my mind.
Yeah, it specifically says on page 3. It's page 3. Hang on one second. Nope. The major degradation product, triclopyr-dianol, required blah, 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 nearly twice as much as triclopyr. This means that triclopyr-dianol, the primary degradation product, is 2 times less mobile in soil than triclopyr.
Page 6, it's the third paragraph under fate and transport. Thank you.
Okay, so we know that it's less mobile, but we don't know I just thought there was a gap with the breakdown products. I think really, honestly,
it looks
big
like
picture.
There's excuse me, I'm sorry. It looks like there's a hand raised too.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
I think the gap, Julie, is that ultimately in the exposure assessment, it's just looking at triclopyr, not at triclopyr and the other one, methyl sulfuron, not necessarily the degradation products. So there's a little bit of a mismatch in terms of fate and transport versus exposure assessments.
Okay, that's helpful. I think, kind of coming back, big picture, I'm just trying to make sure that, if we're we keep applying things to our environment, and then we find down the road, oh, oops, we shouldn't have been doing that. And so I'm just trying to balance, making sure that we have to, we don't really have a better choice, if we're going to be applying additional, herbicides to our environment.
So is your concern then with a check-in next year as much to verify that it's actually accomplishing what we want it to accomplish as
right. So I have
side of things?
concerns with, and with adding additional herbicides from a foliar standpoint, versus the stump, that's systemic, that absorbs down to the root system. I think that is a high value, if we're going to be applying herbicides, that's a high value activity. The foliar application, I think, mobilizes a lot more into the environment with less of a, it just seems like less of a high value.
Julie, have you seen, I'm sorry, Julie, that you weren't able to make the site visit. Have you seen a foliar application with a backpack sprayer?
Nope.
Because it is
actually I have by the highway department, which they may not be very, I have seen it, but highway departments.
Yeah, it really is.
And it gets everything.
Targeted.
It goes all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really is very targeted. And I have a concern that there's the misconception about what actually happens with that foliar spray. But yes, and I will invite you all to observe it as well. So
and there's also a hand raised.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Lisa Vernegard. Please state your name and your address or affiliation.
Thanks, Julie. My name's Lisa Vernegard. I'm the executive director at Sudbury Valley Trustees, and I want to thank everyone here for continuing a really good, thoughtful conversation about this. I just want to follow up on this idea of monitoring and reporting. As Laura pointed out at the start, there's a lot of things that, a lot of shared goals that's driving this conversation. And, Sudbury Valley Trustees wants success. And so success is measured in many ways. The first and most important one is, are we having that mission impact? Are we succeeding in restoring the health of this area? But the other one that Laura spoke to is this practice sustainable? So Laura has been quite clear, and of course I and our whole board has backed this, is that we really use this tool with some finite limit, because SVT, for all sorts of reasons, does not want to be in the business of doing this herbicide work in perpetuity. And so I would ask that you allow, I'm going to be asking Laura, and Laura has been reporting to our board regularly on progress here and what the barriers have been. So she can certainly, and I can be with her to report back to you regularly as to our progress. I would encourage the commission to let this go through this 3-year cycle, so that we can really take it through the full cycle, see what happens, and with the hope and the expectation that we are seeing some real progress, and we in turn start to see some increased biodiversity at this site, which is ultimately the goal. So I just wanted to chime in here that I share the commission's keen interest, as I know our board does, in understanding what the progress is, and quite frankly, what the costs are, what the time is, whether it's our staff time or our volunteer time, what the out-of-pocket expenses are, because that speaks to feasibility, not just here at this site, but at other conservation sites throughout the region. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right. Anybody else? Any other comments from commissioners or the audience? All right. If there's no additional discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to amend the order of conditions as discussed and add a condition associated with seasonal reporting after each application of herbicides, both in the spring and fall of 2022 at a minimum.
Yeah, and I can include the amounts, by the way, so that you'll have that as well.
Second.
Who was that, Brian?
Yep.
Oh, Andrew's not here. Who wants to be Andrew?
Oh, and I can do it. Okay, let's see. Chase Gerbig.
Chase says yes.
Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Brian Crowley.
Brian Crowley, aye.
And me, Julie Rupp, aye. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I appreciate all the information, Laura. All the time you've spent on
And
this.
I will be updating you regularly. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Right.
Good night.
Okay. So that's it for hearings. Amy, you said you had maybe other items or other
I think
updates.
maybe just two other things. 331 Goldsmith, that's the retaining wall.
Yeah, that was.
I think those are an odd looking area. I think it is less wet than it looks, but anyway, they are talking to Matt Marrow about getting the delineation and figuring out where the wetlands are and moving ahead. So I didn't issue an enforcement order yet because the work's done and it's stable. So there wasn't any huge rush. So I guess the commission just needs to decide if you want to issue an enforcement order or hold off and let them see if they move ahead and deal with this, because they do want to build their addition. I told them, you're not going to get your addition until you deal with this wall. So they're motivated.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the street view as well. It looks like a ton of trees came down.
Yeah, I was having a hard time telling that. I didn't look at the street view. That would be a good one to look at.
It's there, you couldn't see through back there before, like, at all. So it looks like a lot of trees came down. And that retaining wall is, I mean, just knowing where the line was on the adjacent property, I mean, they're certainly within the buffer zone, if not within the 50.
Oh, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
guess
really the decision is just if you want to issue an enforcement order or just see if they will deal with it, you know, file notice of intent basically on this and move ahead.
I guess I have concerns about, you know, trying to be consistent with, you know, kind of egregious activity in the buffer zone would be my concern. I don't know if anybody else had a chance to drive by.
I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I genuinely, I think, lean the direction you're going, Julie, which is just to file the paperwork and formalize it.
Right, I've got it all filled out. So since there's a little bit of time here, I will just send it around so you all can DocuSign it and send, and they are expecting it. We'll see where that goes. And then the only other thing I had was just to see if you all would support me going to this EPC to get some funding for the boardwalk projects.
You're talking about like the town forest and
Town Forest or Williams or Cloverdale. There's a whole bunch out there that I got the permits for. Basically a 3-year plan. But obviously the money is always an issue.
CPC seems like a it's a good application of CPC money.
Yeah, and it's certainly it's a highly leveraged project because there's a lot of volunteer work on it already. Andrew said he also thought it sounded like a good possibility. He was going to work with me on getting an application in, and hopefully we can get it for fall town meeting.
They may appreciate hearing from us when there aren't 6 or 7 zeros associated with the number too.
Yeah.
What is it looking like ballpark? Do you have any idea?
The Jim O'Neill's is running up some costs for various segments. I probably just pick one of them. I'm guessing maybe in the $5,000 area.
That's pretty small for CPC, I would think.
I want to get them used to giving us little bits of money here and there.
Yeah. What I feel like we kicked around like the right to farm community signs a bunch. I'm wondering is that something that we have budget for?
Well, it's open space money, so I'm not sure technically it's what should be used for it.
Not CPC, I mean just the conservation budget.
Right, but the cell phone towers are for open space.
Got it.
So I'm not sure if that you could probably stretch it. It's not in the budget for this year.
Sure. Okay. I just know it's something that comes up periodically, and I was thinking about it in the context of Jim leaving. I know it was something that he brought up a lot, and just entering town and looking at the scholastic athletic champions, and I feel like representation matters, and saying something about our town as far rural character is something that everybody seems to report back when there are surveys about what they like or what matters. And I don't know, I was just thinking of it from that standpoint. It'd be nice to do something about
that.
that.
At one point we'd also talked about that the Agricultural Commission should ask for a budget for it.
Right, that's right. Are they active anymore? Okay.
No idea.
Yeah. All right.
And that's all I had.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Not for me.
Okay. All right. Well, if we are all set, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Chase Gerbig.
Aye.
Kyle
Maxwell, aye.
Brian Crowley.
Brian Crowley, aye.
All right. And Julie Rupp, aye. It's unanimous. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for sticking with it.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you next
Good night,
month.
everyone.